We need to talk about the state of cozy games in 2025, because honestly, the last couple of months feel like they've been an absolute mess. And with games releasing like this, and whatever this is, it's easy to see why people feel like cozy gaming is not moving in the right direction. Now, I think it's fair to say that the last couple of months have been a little bit slow. As even though there's been a ton of cozy games releasing, especially if you compare it to this time 2 years ago, there really hasn't been any standout games so far. Up until last week, Hello Kitty was really the only heavy hitter we've seen. And let's be honest, that's really only going to appeal to a certain type of cozy gamer. And the big cozy games that we have on our radar, like Fantasy Life, Coffee Talk Tokyo, Tales of the Shire, the ones everyone are highly anticipating, are all set for mid or end of year releases. So today we're going to talk about why I think cozy gaming is in such a mess right now. Now, I think the first big reason is actually the Nintendo Switch 2. As cozy gaming began to grow in popularity, the Nintendo Switch became the console for cozy gaming. And that's probably because a lot of us wound up buying a Nintendo Switch to play Animal Crossing New Horizons. And I honestly think it's because of Animal Crossing that this new cozy game era was born. Which is why we've seen so many cozy games try their best to make it onto the Nintendo Switch. But it's safe to say the Switch is really feeling its age, and indie developers are beginning to struggle bringing their games to the console, as we've seen with so many questionable ports popping up in the last 6 months or so. So it makes sense why a lot of developers are going to be holding back and waiting to see if they can bring their game to the Switch too. As even though historically Nintendo haven't always been the best with a sequel to one of their best consoles, it is looking like the Switch 2 is going to be a relatively safe bet. The only issue is, Nintendo really have not made it easy for developers to get ready for the launch of the brand new console, as most developers have been just as in the dark as we've been as consumers about when it's releasing. And this has left cozy game developers waiting around for more information to figure out for themselves which device they want to shoot for. And with the bigger names in cozy gaming, like Tales of the Shire and Fantasy Life, both coincidentally deciding to delay their games till later on in the year, it's easy to see why a lot of the other indie games have decided to follow suit. That's why we're seeing basically no release dates and just a ton of coming in 2025. And all of that put together is why the last 3 months have felt especially slow when it comes to indie games. Now, because of all the big cozy games delaying their releases till later on in the year, that's meant that we've kind of been sat around looking for new games to fill our time. And unfortunately, the games we've been left to choose from have been either a little or very disappointing these last couple of months. And no, this does not include Hello Kitty, because although I said it was potentially a little overpriced, I don't actually think that is a bad game. However, there have been a few games that have most definitely missed the mark. Sugar Dew Island is a great example. This is a game where the idea of it sounded fantastic, but the execution was sadly not for a lot of us. And although the PC version of the game wasn't great, as the gameplay itself tried so hard to be relaxing and chill that it wound up becoming boring and aimless, the Nintendo Switch port was absolutely dreadful. Not only did the game crash if you played it too long, but players are currently completely hard-locked out of the game, as no matter how many times they try to restart it, their player will literally never appear on the screen, so they can't do anything to continue. And to make things even worse, the game was released in this state on a platform that has no return policy. The Nintendo Switch version wasn't even the same version of the game that Steam got at launch, and although that was fixed a couple of days after launch with a patch, they did have to issue a statement as to why they haven't got around to fixing all the other bugs as of yet. I think that patch should be coming sometime soon, but even so, it shouldn't have been released on the Switch in this state to begin with. So is this now the trend for cozy games going forward in 2025? I don't think so whatsoever. I personally think cozy gaming as a whole is getting better year on year, and I don't think 2025 is going to be the exception. And I think it's worth remembering that we have had bad cozy games in other years as well. It's just that right now, the bad cozy games outweigh the good ones, and it feels like they're taking up far more space than they ever have before, when in reality, I think this year is just badly paced for good games. But there is one actual issue we do need to talk about. And that is that in 2025, cozy gaming has gone more mainstream. And as the market gets bigger, we're going to see more developers try to target it, regardless of if they do or do not understand what we want. Like, for example, we have already seen some games that aren't remotely cozy whatsoever start to market themselves as that, just to try and capitalize on the market. We've also seen a lot of examples of developers maybe thinking cozy games have to include farming, which, even though I do love a good farming sim, I definitely don't need every single one of my games to have farming inside of them. And I think one of the more recent issues we're seeing is a misunderstanding that cozy games don't need or don't have to have a narrative. And whilst that can be true for some games, like A Little to the Left and Stitch, I've found that a lot of the current cozy games just seem to lack a little bit of substance. As whilst they've nailed the core cozy game mechanics, they haven't really figured out the reason why you should keep playing it. And giving a game a story and a feeling is, to me, what turns an okay cozy game into one of the greatest. I think the reality is this sort of practice goes on in a lot of other gaming genres. We're just in the weird position with cozy gaming as it's grown so much that we got to witness it beginning to happen right in front of us. And I actually think the real reason why cozy gaming doesn't seem to be on the same level as other genres is the pure lack of bigger games companies making cozy games. Right now, I think it really only is Nintendo, Infinity Nikki, and The Sims. I'm not even going to say EA, it's just literally The Sims. And although Nintendo have been trying their best, with some games being fantastic like Animal Crossing New Horizons, and other games not really hitting the same like Princess Peach Showtime, without Nintendo announcing really many games so far for the upcoming year, there's not a lot for us to look forward to in terms of big budget AAA games. And that's the issue with having a genre which basically relies on one single games company. When they've decided to take things a little bit slower for the upcoming release of their console, we feel it massively. And with no other AAA games company giving it a go, this means that we are solely relying on indie developers to carry the cozy gaming market. And this is despite the fact that this is an absolutely dreadful time to be a game developer. And I think it's important to remember, though, that even though we're seeing more bad cozy games than ever before, we're also seeing more fantastic ones. If I look back at the list I made 3 years ago of my favorite cozy games, and compare it to now, the list is almost unrecognizable. Because although there are a few that have remained over the years, like the likes of Unpacking and Spiritfarer, so many of the games that make my list now are actually from within the last year or so. So if you're a cozy gamer right now, here's what I suggest. Firstly, especially if you're on the Nintendo Switch, it's time to stop pre-ordering games. In especially the last 6 months or so, there have been so many game releases on the Switch that have been completely unplayable at launch. And let's be honest, the eShop being a complete mess definitely doesn't help with this, as there's clearly no quality control on any of the games that go up. If you look at the recently released section, it's just a mess with like 5 games that look identical to one another. And with there being no user reviews, no ability to refund or even flag a game that isn't genuine, this just means that pre-ordering is just not worth it. The best thing you can do is either wait for a review to come out or find someone playing or streaming the game so you can see gameplay footage of the console that you're buying it on for yourself. And that way you can make an educated decision as to whether or not it's worth the price. Also, if you're looking to buy a brand new cozy game, especially right now, don't forget to look backwards instead of forwards. So this could either mean taking a look at your unfinished games library or seeing if there's any games you just haven't touched before that take your fancy. Or you can go through some of the most highly reviewed cozy games from the last couple of years and have a look there at any of the games you might have missed. Because as I said, last year as a whole had some fantastic releases, both PC and Nintendo Switch. And I think I'm one of those people who just needs to remind myself that cozy gaming has changed a ton in the last 3 years. It used to be so rare that a brand new cozy game trailer would even come my way. And now it seems like there's multiple cozy games coming out every single week, so we can afford to be a little bit pickier, and we don't need to buy every single game day of release. And instead, I think it's best to find the games that you're really looking forward to and wishlist them. Because with there being so many cozy game announcements, some of them announcing their games as little as a couple of weeks before launch, you might find yourself just weeks away from a game that you would rather spend your time playing. And because there's more cozy games than we've ever had before, sure, there's more bad cozy games, there's also more mid-cozy games, but this also means there's more great cozy games. And although we focused a lot on the negative things that have happened this year, there's also been some fantastic cozy games that have been released that just aren't being talked about. Afterlove VP isn't being talked about nearly enough, and this is an absolutely beautiful story all about loss and music. If you're a PC player, then 2 Point Museum is an absolute blast and a fantastically made game. And Wonderstop, although short, has been to me a very special addition to the cozy gaming genre, as this is a story all about brewing tea and dealing with burnout. And although 2025 has not been the year for cozy gamers yet, I think it's gonna be.